Ayo Shalom.
Ya Baraka, Ya Baraka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yashamaka, Yashamaka, Yahweh, 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 Panyawa al Yak, Panyawa al Yak, Yachanka, Yachanka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yasha'ayah, Yasha'ayah, Panyawa al Yak, Panyawa al Yak, Wayasham, Wayasham, Laka Shalom, Laka Shalom, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, YASHARAHLA, YASHARAHLA. Ya Baraka, Ya Baraka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yashamaka, Yashamaka, Yahweh, 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 Panyawa al Yak, Panyawa al Yak, Yachanka, Yachanka, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yasha'ayah, Yasha'ayah, Panyawa al Yak, Panyawa al Yak, Wayasham, Wayasham, Laka Shalom, Laka Shalom, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Yahweh Shah, Barak Rapah, Barak Rapah, YASHARAHLA, YASHARAHLA.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles.
Things that I endure feel like they damn near killed me. And I lived it dolo, I don't want nobody near me. Broken hearted hearing that my brother pleading guilty. Just another circumstance, a world so filthy. KB got pinched, the fed said that he was out of bounds. Handful of charity for him, there was not a sound. Acting out in school, parents beefing, father's not around. If you dream to fly high, the hood niggas shot you down. Lord, give me strength, I've been patient and I'm waiting. Through the wiles of the devil, I've been battling with Satan. I said, let it to my sons, give you something that'll bless your soul. Patience is a virtue, value close, and it's next to gold. Plan to reach the hoods that's close to us, even Mexico. If you take this oath, it ain't no flaking, we gon' step for show. Father, see my enemies surround me, would you bless my soul? Father, see my enemies surround me, would you bless my soul? Surely it's making me great. Just endure the bumpy roads, no need for making mistakes. If we step across the world and then possess you to hate, then you a coward in the cut and couldn't step with the apes. We came from facing our fears many years before puberty. Warfare erupted from the smoke, I told him you and me. As you can see, we tryna build us a legacy to mold our sons into a different kind of pedigree. We defy the fact that life is over from a felony. Praise ye the Lord, won't you sing a holy melody? Living miracles, sparking slander and sparking jealousy. Gotta stand up manfully and move with zealousy. Unmerited favor, that's what all of us got. And none of us know the end, cause we ain't calling the shots. So we flooding the blocks, the goal is giving them hope to reverse the sting of death, and we breaking the yoke. The yoke.
Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Gotta keep the faith, stay on fire, never cease. Holding on with a peace while he tryna find peace. Saved by hope, tryna see the broader scope. We was washed by the word, and I ain't talk about soap. Steadfast to the end, don't break, never bend. Gotta have works, are you dead? We labor for love, be strong, send my prayers above. We come from kings, but they told us we thugs. Used to look at my brother with mugs, now I greet him with hug. Gotta endure, even know that we been through enough. We got chosen when they doubted us. Most high open doors when it ain't adding up. Believing in the faith is what we stand on. Rhythm of my life, singing in the same song. Pray without ceasing, run this race without wheezing. Keep believing, our salvation nearer than we thinking. Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Gotta have patience and endure it in these last days. An early death when you living in that fast lane. Pressing towards the mark, pushing well beyond pain. We one body, but we focus on the same thing. Iron sharpen iron until we get it right. Keep my faith strong, seeing things that's out of sight. Tending for the faith, we all brothers, we ain't gotta fight. Let your light shine, giving vision to the next. Renewal on my mind, giving all my best. Gotta know that this life is just a test. Live up in the spirit, not the flesh. Stood up on my feet, got wisdom in my breath. Warrior mindset, I'm a servant of the Lord. Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Gotta keep the faith, cause that's all we got. Gotta keep holding on. Endure till the chariots dry. You're not alone, keep staying strong. Yeah. Yeah. When you see some light, that's a breakthrough. Concrete jungle, it's a damn zoo. Eyes wide, while they live on snooze. I'm hoping what you touch impacts some souls. Picture perfect, nigga, like a centerfold. I'm all about my bread, that's the dinner roll. Do it on my lonely, you can send the word. I remember drinking until my speech was slurred. But karma is the bitch, you better treat it right. It's power in these thoughts, she gave me mic. But this your life, nigga roll the dice. Eviction notice, try not to notice. But through your ups and downs, trying to find your purpose. Girded in this truth, blocking evil forces. Good intentions, create your invention. No huddle, 4th and inches. Keep on trying, heart of a lion. Keep on climbing on your way to Zion. Highs and lows, no time to fold. Since the snotty nose, I've been kind of bold. Keep on trying, heart of a lion. Keep on climbing on my way to Zion. Highs and lows, no time to fold. Since the snotty nose, I've been kind of bold. You headed to them streets, trying to fill the void. Trying to box with God, trying to win our Floyd. All these traps, gotta count the joy. I lift my voice up like a trumpet though. Wash away these sins and these transgressions. Change your outlook, that's your only weapon. But we we the black Jews. These is mental Jews. Trying to set a pace while they drive on cruise. Can't trust their actions, they attend is cruel. I'm from a sunny place where it's shady people. Erase your history and they say we equal. Do your all in this world, they make you feeble. Built these corporations, look how they treat you. Get up on your grind, I'm thinking ownership. I know your past mistakes equate to something better. He give visions to the blind. Helen Keller. Keep on trying, heart of a lion. Keep on climbing on your way to Zion. Highs and lows, no time to fold. Since the snotty nose, I've been kind of bold. Keep on trying, heart of a lion. Keep on climbing on my way to Zion. Highs and lows, no time to fold. But since the snotty nose, I've been kind of bold.
I'm not coming in peace. I'm coming with a sword. And we are gonna come with fire, man. That's what's coming to this place. Fire.
That's not happening about the various slave trades that established everyone else's economy.
This devil knows he has but a short time and he's shaking in his boots.
And this place has done evil that you can't imagine. And it is not just this place.
Because we in the midst of darkness. Right? So it's
if you eat consciously enough, you'll be aware of every single thing you put inside yourself.
All right. Shalom, shalom. Let's get started. Building. Shalom to those online. All of you see the title to the class, Cyrus the Great. We're going to break from the Samuel series for this week and the week afterwards. We have the we have the Holy Day of Purim coming up next Thursday sundown and also next Friday sundown, the 14th and 15th days of the month. So tonight's class will entail, and everything with tonight's class will kind of give a world environmental understanding and background to the Persian Empire and how it came about and how it came into fruition, and most definitely how much of an important part it plays within the book of Esther that we will be reading about and going into next week. So these classes are going to be taught again and repeated, definitely for the sake of edification, but so that brothers and sisters are more familiar and aware of the history that coincides with the scriptures, along with secular history that also plays within how much of the Bible story plays out. And what we're going to do is read about a certain king that is definitely mentioned within the scriptures, and a king that has been prophesied to come to do what he did. And aside from all of that, we're going to read and get into the fact of the breakdown tonight pertaining to the Persian Empire. So where we're going to begin is at the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 1.
Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed.
Mm-hmm.
Then he wrote the dream and told us some of the matters.
So Daniel is one of the most, if not the most important historical and impactful prophet when it comes to secular history in the ancient world. Out of Daniel's mouth, at least alone within chapter 2, covers at least roughly 800 to 1,000 years of history. Daniel is very, very important. Daniel is not just someone that's seeing these visions of what's going to come in the future, but is describing how world empirical powers are going to succeed one another, and the catastrophes and the effects that all of these empires have within the world. So he's having a vision at this particular time era. We know that Belshazzar is the king of Babylon right now. Later down the line in this class, we're going to also mention that Belshazzar is co-regent with his father Nabonidus. Nabonidus was the king of Babylon originally within 556 BC and 553 BC. He left his son as co-regent in charge up until 539 BC, when the Babylonian Empire was undermined by Cyrus the Great and eventually swallowed within the Persian Empire. So Belshazzar is the king on the throne right now within Babylon. And with that being said, this is the time period that all of this is happening in. So in the first year, which would be 553 BC, this is when this vision is happening. Sean, continue when you're good.
Verse 2. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea.
The great sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Again, the great sea is the Mediterranean Sea. What?
Verse 3. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another.
So he's about to go into and explain what all of these beasts are. But tonight's lesson, because I'm going to isolate this one particular beast he's about to name, we're just going to get into this one. Skip down to verse 5.
Verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side.
Go ahead.
And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh.
So, all of you seen the thumbnail to the class, Thawada Ta'afayat, for ingeniously coming up with that. The bear with the 3 ribs in its mouth. The bear or the grizzly bear has a powerful, barbaric, animalistic nature to it, to the point where anything it grabs, it rips and shreds apart. This is being described as the Persian Empire because the Persian Empire became more vast in geographical size and comparison than the Babylonian Empire. Because of that, the reason why it's being described again as the bear is because of the fact that, due to the fact that its geographical size more than I could say doubled, if not tripled, the size of the Babylonian one, the bear fits the description accurately and accordingly. And the 3 ribs in its mouth are the 3 great nations that the Persians took over and eventually conquered and became a part of the empire itself. So I hope you guys are taking notes. So the bear represents the Persian Achaemenid Empire. I'm going to spell that. The bear represents the Persian Achaemenid Empire.
Okay.
And then from there, the 3 ribs that were in this bear's mouth, which means the nations that were consumed by this bear that had power, prominence, and superiority over the nations. The 3 ribs represent the nations of the Medes, or how can, matter of fact, let me put it this way. Kingdom of the Medes.
M-E-A-D or M-E-D?
M-E-D-S. Kingdom of the Medes. Lydians, and Babylonians.
300.
He's talking about Xerxes. Would this be the time of the first 300 movie? Yashar, not exactly. It would be because it deals with the Persian Empire, but this is almost 100 years before, I'm going to say. That's in the time of Xerxes. Xerxes is the fourth king over the Achaemenid Empire. We're talking about Cyrus, who's the first king. So the three ribs represent the Medes, the kingdom of Lydia, and the kingdom of the Babylonians. The three ribs that are inside the bear's mouth represent Cyrus the Great conquering and overtaking these three kingdoms to then make it and become the Persian Empire. And it's not that it discludes any of the other nations or peoples he took over and subjugated, but these three ribs represent these three great nations that were their own empires in states at the time, reigning and ruling sovereignly.
And he took those three over in that created Persian Empire. That's what you're saying?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So, with that being said, Apaya, could you pull up the slideshow presentation, Babu Kasha?
Quick with the sword.
Again, for the sake of this class and the fact that we need to not just understand more history, we need to read and understand more history that aligns with the scriptures. So we're going to read into the fact of how this king particularly is not just mentioned within scripture, prophesied to come, but also on behalf of the fact that he very much does play a part within our history that we have to read about. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Apaya. So I'm going to blow this up. All right. The Persian Achaemenid Empire, introduction into Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus II. Oh. Yes, sir. First slide, Apaya. All right. So these are notes all of you guys can gladly take down. The Achaemenid family name comes from the eponymous founder of the clan Achaemenes. Achaemenes, the timeline for him starts between the years of 705 to 675 BC. Achaemenes had a son named Thaspes, according to ancient documents, and at the time, or within his time era, captured the Elamite city of Anshan and ruled independently between the kingdoms of Elam and Assyria. Thaspes ruled from 675 to 640 BC. He died having two sons, Cyrus I and Ariaramnes. This Cyrus I is not to be confused with the Cyrus the Great, who was Cyrus II. There's one, which is the first, and then there's the second one. The first one is the grandfather. The second one is the grandson. The ancient Iranians had a custom of naming their children after their own fathers. So that's why you guys see the first. And of course, as we go down, you'll see the second. But I did that so that way it's clear and it's distinctive of who and what it is being spoken about. So Thaspes died having two sons, Cyrus I and Ariaramnes. Ariaramnes ruled in Persis, which is in southwestern Iran today, and Cyrus I was given full control over Anshan, north of the Persian Gulf. Ariaramnes and his son Arsames became a vassal power under Median overlordship, and that continued up until the time of Cyrus the Great. They came under Median overlordship through military campaigns they were making at the time. So within this 8th to 7th century BC era, I want all of you to know as well, the Assyrians were the predominant superpower within the region. The Assyrians were also making military incursions constantly into the region of the Medes, and the next couple of slides will also talk about them as well. But this also coincides with their history as well. It's a lot of history, but to make it short, concise, simple, and just clear, we're sticking to the Persian and the Medes and the breakdown that's occurring right now. So That's Ariaramnes. Cyrus the First. This is the key figure I want all of you to write down and pay attention to. Cyrus the First, who was the grandfather of Cyrus the Second, continues to rule in Anshan, as well as the second one did, independently from his brother Ariaramnes. 600 BC, Cambyses, who is also Cambyses the First. There's a second Cambyses who's the son of Cyrus the Second. So again, to give that clarification. In 600 BC, Cambyses takes rulership from his father, Cyrus the First, and with his wife, Mandane, had his son, future ruler and Persian overlord, Cyrus the Second. His reign was under the overlordship of the Median king Astyages, who reigned from 585 to 550 BC. Astyages is also mentioned in the scriptures as well. We're going to read about it. Now, for the last bullet point, in 559 BC, the story and kingship of who the world knows as Cyrus II, known to history as Cyrus the Great, comes onto the political scene as king of Anshan, inheriting the throne after his father died. Cambyses the First, that is. He ruled the Persian Empire until his death in 530 BC. Apayak for a second, not to interrupt the slideshow. Can we pull up the picture? Can we pull up the picture of ancient Medes? So, as all of you can see here, the Median Empire, separate from the Kingdom of Lydia, which would be modern-day Turkey over here to the left. That's where the Kingdom of Lydia is. This is the Kingdom of the Medes. Elam, as I just mentioned, and then you have Babylon over here. And this is between the time period of 678 to 549 BC, 550 BC, 549 BC, when the Kingdom of the Medes comes to an end. Now, all of you see here on the map, you see Pasargadae, which is where Cyrus made his capital. You see Anshan right here. This is where Cyrus the First, Cambyses, and then Cyrus the Second were ruling as vassal states, even though they were kings themselves. And then you guys see here in the region of Media, they had their capital. This is, the Persian form of it, Hagmatana or Ekbatana. So this is where the Median capital was. So again, you have Anshan over here, where Cyrus and his sons were ruling. And then you have Hagmatana over here, where the Medes were ruling. This is their capital. That's why that star is here. So the Medes and the Persians, Persepolis Persians, also synonymous with the peoples, were the ancient Iranian peoples dwelling in the land at this time. Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you. What's the dates? The date for the ancient Median Empire is right up at the top, 678 to 549 BC. Apayak, if you could, Baba Kushal, let's pull up the slideshow once again. All right. So again, these are the dates for these individual Persian kings that are the descendants of Achaemenes. It's called the Persian Achaemenid Empire for a reason. The descendants of Achaemenids were ruling over the Persian and Median peoples. And again, to the last point, in 559 BC, the story and kingship of who the world knows as Cyrus II, known to history, to us as Cyrus the Great, comes onto the political scene as king of Anshan, inheriting the throne after his father died. He ruled the Persian Empire until his death in 530 BC. All right, Apayak, next slide. Any questions, put them in the chat. I am paying attention as I'm going through and over this. All right. The Median dynasty. All of you just looked at the map. You know, I like to give the geography. That way we know where we are. And of course, Sha'an, Kaz, any one of you brothers, Isaiah 13, that talks about the Medes and how they'll be the ones to be a predominant precursor in taking down Babylon, just as the ancient Medes were. by the hands of Cyaxares I and the Babylonian king Nabopolassar. It's going to happen and unfold once again. So, again, with that being said, so that we're good with the geography, we know where we're at. So the Median dynasty. Media is an ancient country of northwestern Iran, generally corresponding to the modern-day countries of Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, and parts of Kermanshah. Deioces is the first king and founder of the Median kingdom. Herodotus, a lot of you have heard of him. He was a Greek historian who is predominant with recounting Greek and also Persian history. Herodotus, mainly being on record to follow the Median Persian history, recounted how he was the first Median king to gain independence from the Neo-Assyrian Empire and governed from 727 to 675 BC, uniting the Median people to organize and establish its first king and sovereign kingdom. So, what I will say about Deioces, the Median people were disunited, and they were one of the main rebellious peoples that the Assyrians had to keep launching military campaigns against to constantly subjugate them. I believe the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal wrote within his documents and his ancient libraries that is still within, I believe, ancient Iraq today, about how much incursions they made into the land of the Medes. They carried off their gold, their silver, destroyed their gods, put them to the winds, such and such, so on and so forth. These people were finally united under this one man. And finally, this is where Median independence was gained from this particular individual who became king. And this is where you have the Medes from, because we're going to read in scripture about the Persians and the Medes. They're two separate peoples in one region. Necessarily, you could say tribal peoples, but they're still separate nationality pertaining to identity, excuse me. And on top of that, you can clearly and evidently see from the scriptures why it says Persians and Medes. This is also giving context to what we're going to read about in the scriptures. So, Mapaya, could you scroll down? So his son Phraortes, reigning after him from 675 to 653 BC, started wars with Assyria, no different from his father, because the Assyrians were constantly, again, making incursions into the lands of the Medes to subjugate these peoples. They were the ruling empire of the age at that time. But he died fighting against them during the reign of the Neo-Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, who was the king of Assyria that reigned from 669 to 631 BC. And again, I give these dates because the dates are important with how they're going to line up perfectly and mirror the scriptures. The next king, he's important. Cyaxares I, who reigned from 625 to 585 BC, becomes the third king over the Median kingdom. His reign is significant because he allied with Nabopolassar, who was the figurehead and king over Babylon from 626 to 605 BC, who was the king and head over the first, and at that point, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and forces to put a final end to the Neo-Assyrian Empire, along with the Scythians, in 612 BC. So a lot of you have read about Nebuchadnezzar. A lot of you have heard of him. That's his father, Nabopolassar, that teamed up with the king of the Medes to take down the Assyrian Empire. So when the book of Nahum prophesies about the downfall of Assyria, it was by these two kings and along with remnants of the northern kingdom, because the Scythians also took part in destroying and taking them down as well. We good? Questions in the chat, so everyone following. Give a con in the chat if everyone's following and taking notes. This is important. This is important. We need the world historical background and context into what we're going into so that we understand the case and the historical environment and age for Purim next week. Put a con in the chat. Before we scroll over to the next slide. All right. Okay. Apayat, next slide. All right. So now the Median king Astyages. Astyages is the final Median king and is also the most important of all, helping pave the way for Cyrus's king and overlordship over both the Medes and the Persians. Reigning from 585 to 559 BC, his daughter, Mandane, was given over to a Persian prince, Cambyses I, who reigns from 600 to 559 BC, who's yet to be king after his father, have a son whose name is Cyrus, the second, not the first one, again, who becomes Cyrus the Great. Herodotus' account, as being the most famed and widely recollected, recalls how Astyages had two dreams about how his empire would be overthrown. The second one, more explicitly in detail, shown him how his own daughter would birth the one that would overthrow his rulership and put an end to the Median overlordship from the Persians. The dream was indeed true and did come to pass, and the man that was his own grandson he tried to have killed, Cyrus the Great. So that concludes the slide presentation. I wanted to just give that really quick.
That's a lot of stuff.
So we're going into it. So I can put it in there. So we're good with that. I want to just read something small from one of the good sources I have. So again, Herodotus was one of the main chroniclers of history pertaining to the Persians and the Greeks, even though he roughly wrote almost 200 years after the fact. He did his best to recall accounts and did his best to, what I'll give credit to an Edomite for, put everything together to the best of his ability without biasness. So this is one of his famous books pertaining to Persian history. This is the Histories of Herodotus. If any one of you can see this, should be clear for all of you guys.
Wow.
This is the Histories of Herodotus, translated by Tom Holland. I'm going to read from page 54 and begin. So, this says, his successor on the throne was his son, Astyages, who just went through the slideshow. He's the son of Cyaxares. He had a daughter called Mandane, and one night in his sleep, he imagined that he saw her urinating, making such a flood that it filled his entire city and drowned the whole of Asia. When Astyages confided the details of this nightmare to those among the Magi, the Median priests, who were proficient in the art of reading dreams, the interpretation that they gave him, a full and precise one, chilled his blood. As a result, when Mandane came to be of nubile age, he did not give her as a wife to any Mede of appropriate status, but instead, haunted still by his dream, married her off to a Persian named Cambyses, a man whom he knew to be of good family and undemonstrative disposition, but who, in Astyages' opinion, was so lacking in any social standing as to be inferior by far of a Mede of even mediocre rank. But then, not a year after Mandane had settled down to married life with Cambyses, Astyages was visited by a second dream of his daughter. This time he saw a vine sprouting out of her intimate parts, and the tendrils of the vine reached so far that they served to pull out all Asia in their shade. Again, Astyages confided to the dream readers what he had seen, and that he had his daughter, who was about to give birth, sent from Persia and placed under lock and key. His intention, once the baby had been born, was to have it killed. For the Magi, skilled as they were in the reading of dreams, had interpreted his vision to mean that his daughter's offspring would rule in his place. No wonder then that Astyages should have been made uneasy. Sure enough, once Cyrus had been safely delivered, a king summoned a kinman of his, Harpagus, by name a Mede, who served as a steward of the entire royal estate and was the loyalist of the loyal, to issue him with some very particular orders. If I give you something to do, Harpagus, you are to do it properly. No going behind my back, side with anyone apart from me, and you will be sure to pay the price. Now that Mandane had given birth to the child, you are to get hold of it, take it to your house, and dispose of it, and you can enter the body as you please. O king, Harpagus replied, have you ever had any reason to find fault with me in the past? Can you really doubt how just determined I am not to get your orders wrong in the future? You have just told me what you want to see happen. My duty is clear enough. What must be done, must be done. So, pertaining to what I just read, that's the dream that he had in the chat. Excuse me, that's the dream that he had that was mentioned in the slideshow that he was fearing about, because he looked at, he tried to have his dream interpreted, and the Magi told him, your kingdom's going to be overruled and overrun. Now, Harpagus, the Median that he entrusted to do this deed to, gave it to a man and his wife that just had a stillborn child, and they raised the child up as their own. So Cyrus then at that point comes to be founded out that he's still alive, and this Median that he entrusted the job to kill him didn't do so. So what happens in the place, and I have a video that we're going to watch that also gets into the detail of it. This general, because he didn't do the deed, is invited to a feast where Astyages, the king of the Medes, had him eat his own son.
Ooh.
He dismembered his son and had him cooked, and then after he was finished eating, showed him his head, his hands, and his remains to show him that because he disobeyed him, not killing Cyrus as a baby, this is what he did to him, as in paying the price. And because he didn't kill him, Harpagus, the general that, the man that was entrusted to do the deed, he eventually later down the road teamed up with Cyrus to help him take down Astyages. So, yes, Ganan, you just heard what I said, and yes, he did do that. That was in the game. Wow. Well, guess what? You just heard it here happening within ancient history. So, because he did that, the Median general Harpagus teamed up with Cyrus to help overthrow Astyages in 550 BC. So, with that being said, something many of you read but probably never understood, now you are going to understand it. Remember, we're in the Persian era of history. Let's get the book of Bel and the Dragon. Let's read the first verse. Bel and the Dragon, the first verse.
This is Bel and the Dragon, verse 1. And King Astyages was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. And Daniel conversed with the king and was honored above all his friends.
So, in the first verse, which is all we need to read, just Bel and the Dragon, the first verse, says King Astyages was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. That was 550 BC that occurred. Cyrus began his kingship in Anshan in 559 BC. 9 years later, Harpagus, and what happened with the story I just told you about, and what will be furthermore explained later, helped Cyrus to overthrow Astyages in 550 BC. So when it says that King Astyages was gathered to his fathers, it's not that he died, because he did live afterwards, but Cyrus inherited his position and was now the lord over the Persians and the Medes. So that's why, again, this is the first rib. So as we're reading this, now that it makes sense within its historical context, that's what this is talking about and referring to. Mm-hmm. Let's get the book of Daniel, chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 31.
The book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible.
So everyone should know about the Daniel statue. I'm sure all of you have seen it at some point, and Yeshai has at times before in the past extensively gone into it so that brothers know and should definitely know the breakdown by now. Go ahead.
Verse 32. This image head was of fine gold.
What?
His breast and his arms of silver.
Stop there. So we know the head of gold. Daniel told to Nebuchadnezzar, "You're this head of gold." The head of gold represents the Babylonian Empire. The second part of the scripture, his breast and his arms were of silver. Apaya, could you pull up a picture of the Daniel statue? I want to show the significance as to why particularly the second part of the statue represents the Persians and the Medes. Yes, sir. We got the good brother Yashar in the building. Head of gold is the Babylonians. A lot of imagery in tonight's class, so please pay attention closely. That way everybody is able to follow along. There we go. That one right there, the first one. The first one's perfect. So, the head of gold, Babylonia. Now, all of you see the chest of arms in silver, which represents Medo-Persia. Now, again, in the slideshow, I gave the information on both kingdoms because they're two separate people, even though they're in the same land region. But the arms, we all have two arms. Look at the Lord's symbology as he's given the prophet Daniel this high level of wisdom and giving it unto Nebuchadnezzar. Two arms, the Medes, the Persian, but one torso, one body. It's because they became one, ruling over the world for roughly 200 years. So the chest and the arms of silver and the body being connected to represent these two people uniting and becoming one to reign over the world at that time. So that's why the Persians and the Medes represent the silver. Put a comment in the chat if that makes sense. This is the perfect imagery and symbology that the Lord is given unto Daniel to then portray and show unto the king. Again, the Medes, one side, Persians, the other, one body, represent these two peoples coming together under the unification of Cyrus the Great, i.e. Cyrus II in 550 BC, so on and so forth, to then take down two more kingdoms. Kawakan Yashar, indeed it is. The perfect imagery.
That's a good one.
Now, when we go back to Daniel, let's go back to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 5. I want to explain what verse 5, the first part of it, means. Go ahead.
Daniel chapter 7, verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side.
So that one side means one side was more prominent and higher and superior to the other. At first, it was the Medes over the Persians. At first, the Medes had superiority over the Persians. Cambyses I was under the overlordship of Astyages, who was the Median king. But now that Cyrus took over Media, it is now, even though he's Persian, now the king over the Persians and the Medes. Now it's toppled that the Persians are now over the Medes. So when it says up on itself on one side, that's one group now usurping another power and authority of another. So now the Persians have the superiority complex over the Medes. That's what it means when it's said up on itself on one side. Now we have two more kingdoms. We have the kingdom of Lydia to the east, which would be modern day Turkey, connected to some parts of outer Greece. And then we have the Babylonian kingdom that the king of Babylon, who was originally in 556, Nabonidus, left his son in charge, being Belshazzar, in 553 BC. So what we're now going to do, see if I have anything else to pull up. Oh, matter of fact, Apaya, could you pull up the second picture of the Median dynasty, the kingdom of Media, the kingdom of Lydia? Give you guys a map of how all this comes about with the family tree. All right, so if you guys want to take this down, write accordingly. Oh, wow. I broke it apart, that way it's easier and more clear to read. So we have the Median dynasty over here. Of course, we have Diocles, the king of Media, 727 to 675. We have Phraortes, his son, Cyaxares the first, his son. Again, this is the king that also helped Nabopolassar, the father of Nebuchadnezzar, take down the Assyrian Empire and destroy Nineveh. And then finally, we have Astyages, the final and last king of the Median Empire, reigning from 585 to 550 BC. Now, Astyages is important only because in the beginning of Bel and the Dragon, again, when it says that King Astyages was gathered to his fathers and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom, Cyrus is now the overlord of the Persians and the Medes in 550 BC. And then Astyages has Cyaxares II, who is also Darius the Mede inside the book of Daniel, the king of Media. Now, from here, the Achaemenid dynasty, the king of Anshan, we could look really quick. We'll do the kingdom of Lydia last. We have the Achaemenid dynasty. Of course, again, we have Achaemenes as the eponymous father of the family. Then we have Achaemenes, the king of Anshan. We have his son Thespes again. Cyrus the first. He had two sons, Ariaramnes of Persia, then Arsames, his son. Not going to get too much into his line. But then continuing with Cyrus the first, we have Cambyses the first, who was also a king of Anshan. And then the unification of the crowns, Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus II, the king of the Achaemenid Empire from 559 to 530 BC, concluding his reign at 29 years. I'm going to stop there. That way you guys can take all this down. Again, this is important. We're setting the background for the historical stage at this time. All right. Now, someone also of importance. We have the Mernidai dynasty, the kingdom of Lydia, which of course would be more toward the east, toward the Anatolian region, which would be modern day today Turkey. We have Ardes, the first king, Sadyates, the second. We have Alyattes. His daughter was married to Astyages. They had a treaty at this time after the kingdom of the Assyrians were overthrown to keep peace between the two powers. And then we have the final king of Lydia. We have Croesus from 585 to 546 BC. This was the second king to be overthrown by Cyrus. And this was the second rib. So once everyone's done getting that down, I'm going to give a map of how extensive the Persian Empire was. Oh. Again, this here at the bottom, Cyrus the Great, Cyrus the Second, is important. The king of the Achaemenid Empire, and his dates as follows are also important. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, could you go back up a little bit?
Khan, Yashar. So, that is the eagle eye. Main system of belief in their religion was Zoroastrianism. Cyrus the First.
Yeah, man. Trying to get it.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let's proceed. Joseph Sean got a picture of it.
I got it.
Okay. All right. All right. So, Apaya, could you pull up the map of the Persian Empire? Not that one. Should be the Achaemenid Persian Empire, circa 500 BCE. To the right. There we go. All right. So that's fine. So this is how extensive the Persian Empire became in 500 BCE, which was the time period of Darius the First or Darius the Great that extended the Persian Empire to its heights during his reign. This is also the king mentioned within the book of Ezra, who we finished the temple work under as well.
Darius was a son or grandson of Cyrus the Great?
He was a cousin.
Cousin?
But he's from the Arsames, you know, his brother. So when Tepes had his son, he had Cyrus the First and Ariaramnes.
Right.
He had a son, Arsames, who then his son was Hystopses. Hystopses is the father of Darius. So if you search up Darius, his name also comes up as Darius Hystopses. But there are also, according to his own description that he wrote, he's also an Achaemenid because he also comes from that line. He's just from the other line, being the cousin of Cyrus.
Right.
So all of you can see here, the colors kind of give way of the expansion under Darius the Great, 522 BC. You see the light green areas all over the map. The Persian heartland, which is where Cyrus reigned, Persis, you see Anshan. And then the expansion that went underway with Cyrus within his lifetime. And then you're capable of seeing just how extensive, with the over 2 million square miles, how far the Persian Empire extended and reached. So to what Yashar had said earlier about the Battle of 300, that's just one battle, but the wars between the Greeks and Persians began underneath Darius the Great around 490 BC. And this is why the Persians were hated by the Greeks so much, and this is why the constant conflict and the wars and the back and forth that, of course, you read and know about in secular history, Alexander the Great coming to conquer. This is why. So before Alexander's even alive and within the picture, Thrace, which is one of the Greek city-states, along with the entirety. Apaya, could you zoom in on Lydia? That way we see that on the map. Lydia all the way over here to the left in the pink. You see that right there. You see Lydia on the map. So Lydia is where the king Croesus reigned. And that's also the land that was incorporated within the Persian Empire. And then you have, I'll just mention Halicarnassus. This is where Herodotus is from. You have Ionia, which is Greece. These are Ionian islands, which is why it says that there. But necessarily, this is Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, if you will. And this is how far and how extensive the Persian Empire stretched. Yeah.
Wow.
200 years over the world, and this is how much land they were able to conquer and subdue. All right, Apayak, if you could zoom out. Ganan said, you answered my question that I had about Alexander's existence because he had a battle with Darius. Ganan, that Darius that Alexander was fighting was Darius III. The one I'm talking about here within this map that extended the empire at this time is Darius I. Again, remember, they had a way in a common tradition to pass along their father's names to their children. So the Darius that Alexander was fighting against and trying to conquer was Darius III. This Darius is Darius I. And that was in the 330s BC. And then the last king, Apaya, could you pull up the picture of the Chaldean dynasty, the Neo-Babylonian Empire? All right. So the Chaldean dynasty, we have Nabopolassar at the top. He, along with the king of the Medes, Cyaxares I, were the ones to take down, and the Scythians, were the ones to take down the kingdom of Assyria and the Neo-Assyrian Empire, with Nineveh being destroyed in 612 BC. And before Nebuchadnezzar was in the picture, even though Nebuchadnezzar at this time was the crown prince, his father was the king.
I was watching this stuff last night. That's crazy. And now y'all talking about
God.
Nuts. YouTube.
So we have the most famed, and if not the most noted person in all of secular history when it comes to ancient world history, Nebuchadnezzar II. There was a Nebuchadnezzar in the 2000s BC that preceded him. So he is Nebuchadnezzar II. He is the king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He is the head of gold that Daniel talks about, that Daniel was talking to, and his years of reign were from 605 to 562 BC. And then he has a son, Amel-Marduk. Now, so what you have to love and appreciate about the scriptures. So you guys see Amel-Marduk reign from 562 to 560 BC. Now, across the borders of language, he was murdered. So across the barriers of language in Babylonian, it would be Amel-Marduk. For us within the scriptures, it would be Evil Merodach. And he's actually mentioned inside the scriptures. Go to 2 Kings. Apaya, keep this up. Go to 2 Kings chapter 25 and verse 27. This is what you have to appreciate about the scriptures, because they actually mention the name of kings that intertwine with our history, and it makes the Bible come to life. 2 Kings chapter 25 and verse 27.
2 Kings 25, verse 27. It came to pass in the 7th and 13th year of the captivity of Jehoiakim.
Pause there. That's 560 BC. Jehoiachin was taken into captivity in 597 BC by Nebuchadnezzar. So the 30th and 7th year of his captivity, which means he was still living, was still in captivity, and he was taken away at the age of 18, which has to mean he was 55 at this time. That evil Merodach, continue reading.
In the 12th month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, that evil Merodach, king of Babylon.
Who?
Evil Merodach, king of Babylon.
Go ahead.
In the year that he began to reign, did lift up the head of Jehoiakim up above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon.
So, wait, no, did you read the last part of 27?
Oh, sure. That evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, did lift up the head of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, out of prison.
Man was in prison for 37 years. You were 18, a young man carried away captive, and then you spent 37 years of your life behind bars. So this king, Amel Marduk, is evil Merodach within the scriptures. And he is the king of Babylon, and is the son of Nebuchadnezzar.
Say what's his name again?
Amel Marduk is evil Merodach in the scriptures.
Evil Merodach.
I'm only going into this to add it on because of the historicity of the scriptures I want to prove and bring out. Neri Glissar is another one. Is there any questions? Who's the one that witnessed the writing in the wall? Panyan, I'm going to answer your question shortly. Yashar asked, is Nabopolassar Nebuchadnezzar the same thing, the same name being that there is a Nebuchadnezzar II? Yashar, no. The Nabo prefix is just the reference of the Babylonian god Nebo, and that's why across the barriers of the Shemitic languages into English, Akkadian, cuneiform, so on and so forth. It may seem they're interchangeable, but they're not. That being that they're two separate individuals, even though the Nabo prefix can make it seem that way. So Nabopolassar is the father, and Nebuchadnezzar is the son. But Nebuchadnezzar being the second just means that there was a Nebuchadnezzar that pre-existed before him. All right, so Neri Glissar. Neri Glissar is also a king of Babylon who reigned from 560 to 556 BCE. Get Jeremiah chapter 39 and verse 1.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 39 and verse 1. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his army against Jerusalem. And they besieged it.
So that's 588 BC. Yeah. 11th year would be 2 years later in 586 BC when the destruction of the temple happened. And ultimately, the kingdom of Judah came to an end. He was carried away into captivity, and he had his eyes gouged out and his children killed before his eyes. Before it happened, it was carried away. Skip down to verse 3.
Verse 3. And all the princes of the king of Babylon came in and sat in the middle gate.
So all the princes were there at the time that this siege happened. Just read the first name.
Even Nergal
Sharezer. So Nergal Sharezer would be Neri Glissar, because he's a prince of the king, and necessarily, again, across the borders of language. that would be Neriglissar to the Babylonians. But to us, as we're reading in the scriptures, it's Nergal-Sharezer. And there's two of them here, but one of them became the king, who is this individual here that you see on the map. Assuming that you see within the family tree. So again, Amel-Marduk is the son of King Nebuchadnezzar. And then you have Neriglissar, who was present at the siege of Jerusalem in 586 BC. That is one of the crown princes that eventually becomes king after Amel-Marduk and Nebuchadnezzar died.
Oh, yeah.
Jeremiah 39 and verse 1 to verse 3. Was it Marduk also a false deity in Mesopotamia? Exactly. And guess who was named after this false deity? Mordecai, inside the book of Esther. That's why Esther, it says her Hebrew name was Hadassah, but then she's called Esther. We were in captivity, and what sounds similar to Esther? Ishtar. Bel is what? A Babylonian god. What was Daniel called? Belshazzar. All right, so back to the sister Panyun's question, because we're actually going to read it before we get into the video. So she asked, who's the one who witnessed the writing on the wall? So the one that witnessed the writing on the wall was the crown prince and regent or co-regent to King Nabonidus, who was the last king of Babylon. Belshazzar was the one that read the writing on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to explain this because there's actually some historical discrepancies that scholars believe are in the book of Daniel, but are not. Get Daniel chapter 5 and verse 25.
Daniel chapter 5, verse 25. And this is the writing that was written.
Mene, Tekel, and Upharsin. Go ahead up. You good?
Verse 26. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it.
So his kingdom was now coming to an end because, again, within 539 BC, Cyrus undermines Babylon at the Battle of Opis and took Babylon without a fight. Go ahead.
Verse 27. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balance and thou art found wanting.
So even with all the riches that you have, you still won't be satisfied with the possessions that you have being the king. Go ahead.
The rest, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes
and the Persians. So now you get why he was given this vision, because now his kingdom's coming to an end. And this happening, so I didn't want to read the whole entire story, but because he decided to make a mockery of the vessels that were taken out of the temple and use them for his own selfish purposes, because he's having a feast with all of his lords, the Lord gave him this vision through Daniel to show him what was going to happen. So thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Go ahead.
Verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold upon his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom.
So I want you to pause there. Now I want to go back to Nabonidus, who was the king of Babylonia from 556 to 539 BC, and Belshazzar, the crown prince and regent. So I want to say this. There's a lot of history concerning him that the video is going to explain, but he went away into Tema, Arabia, to go fulfill his desire and purpose to worship the moon god Sin, because his mother was Assyrian, as may have been his father, and they were worshipers of the moon god Sin. He went away to Tema, Arabia, and left off worshiping the chief idol and deity of the Babylonians, Marduk, and fell out with the priest of Marduk in their temple because he no longer wanted to worship Marduk. So the reason why I'm saying all that is because when we're reading the book of Daniel, it says Belshazzar is king, but when you search up the last king of Babylon, you'll see that it's Nabonidus. But Nabonidus left his son in charge as king over the Babylonians, even though he's king over the whole Babylonian empire. So this is why it says here that he would make him third in the kingdom. Daniel's third, Belshazzar is second, and Nabonidus is the first. Does that make sense?
Was he trying to undo the judgment at the Most High by proclaiming Daniel king? To be like, well, if he's king, did they think was that what it was? Why he named him third?
Well, he said whoever interpreted the vision for me would receive the reward for it, which was, the chain and being clothed in purple. But the reason why that is because even despite that, it's the same with Nebuchadnezzar and how Daniel explained to him that your kingdom is going to fall, so on and so forth. And he was still in his pride, looking at his glorious kingdom and saying, look at everything that I built, and didn't understand and know that it's coming to an end. So they still lived lavishly and graciously, but it didn't stop them from being who they were as heathen. So again, when it's talking about that third ruler in the kingdom, Nabonidus is the first ruler. He left his son in charge, Belshazzar, as a regent or co-regent. I've explained this with the kings of Judah, how the king would have his son reign with him. That way, the one to come up afterwards, it would just be a smooth transition. So Belshazzar was a co-regent of the king, left in charge of the Babylonians as king, while Nabonidus, even though he's king, is away presently. And then the third ruler would be Daniel himself. All right. Give a comment in the chat if everyone's following along. If everyone's following along, let me know. All right. So I have this book where I'm going to read some inscriptions that Nabonidus left and wrote himself. All right. Everyone is, all praises. All right. With that being said, I'm following, but these names, hey, our names as Israelites are simple. We don't do all this. And if you thought that, I got something else for you with what I'm about to read, because so this is the second book. This is Nabonidus and Belshazzar, a study of the closing events of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Apayak, if you could pull this up for everyone. So this book explains the closing of the Babylonian Empire and explains the next verse in Daniel chapter 5 and verse 30 that talks about how Belshazzar was killed. That prophecy came to pass because the kingdom of the Babylonians came to an end. So I'm going to read just two excerpts from this book. This is chapter 4, the exalted ancestry of Nabonidus. This is what he wrote in his own inscriptions. They're known as the Nabonidus Chronicles, that also proved that Belshazzar was his son. This is page 17. It says, Nabonidus, the king of Babylon, the appointed one of Nabu and Marduk, the son of Nabu, Balatsu Ikbi, the wise prince I am. He also says, I am Nabonidus, the great king, the mighty king, the king of totality, the king of Babylon, the king of the four quarters, the preserver of Isagila and Azida, whose destiny Sin and Ningal, the gods he was worshiping, while he was in his mother's womb, decreed for the lot of royalty, the son of Nabu Baletsu Ikbi, the wise prince, the reverer of the great gods I am. So I'm reading this. Nabonidus sounds like a virus. Listen, man, we get it's a fact. He does, but I'm reading this so that we understand more of the historical context within the scripture. So follow along. So this is page 137. This is to help prove that Belshazzar is his son that he left in charge. It says the seed of the field of the god Bel, Isaiah 46. These are Babylonian deities. Israelites are also worshiping. Which in the month Nisan of the 7th year of Nabonidus, the king of Babylon, Belshazzar, the son of the king, at the command of the king, divided for the taxmasters. So I'm finished reading that there. This is the book that I have read the excerpt from. With that being said, we're now going to read about how these two dynasties within the family trees, the king of Lydia being Croesus and the king of Babylon, Nabonidus, and his region he left in charge, Belshazzar, his son, eventually came to an end, and the Persian Empire is now in place. Apaya, if you could, pull up the last picture of Tema, the Arabian desert, so we know where Nabonidus was throughout his reign. You get the door for you, Tazar. Let's get the last picture. All right, so we see where Tema, Arabia is in the Arabian desert, the land of the Midians, of course, Dedan. You see Tema right here on the map. This is where Nabonidus was reigning at predominantly within the 10-year span and more so of the years that he was king of Babylon. So he was the king of Babylon. You guys see two Babylon upwards more toward the north. You see Tema right here. This is where he chose to reign at because he fell out with the priest of Marduk, not worshiping the chief deity and god of the Babylonians, Marduk. And due to that, he chose to go elsewhere to worship the moon god Sin and take his idols and his statues with him to do this. So to just give a geographical description of where he was at the particular time, he was here in the south of Arabia doing everything he was doing the 10 years he was away.
Is that same moon, the moon god that the Muslims worship? Would that coincide?
It would, because it's still very much present today. Yet the moon god said, you see how they still have the crescent moon on their flags?
Ah.
There you go. There you go. Come on, Joseph.
Wow.
All right, now that we got that down, Apayat, if you could, let's play the video about Cyrus the Great. So before he starts it, we've covered pretty much the background, the family trees, Daniel. We've covered the important things, but the video is going to kind of summarize and bring everything together. That way we understand Cyrus in totality and we can move forward. Apayat, go ahead when you're ready. I'm just going to let you know when to pause it at certain points. That way, I'll be able to explain and expound as the video is going on. All right. When you're ready, anyone that has
the Fair Use and Copyright Act, copyright law states that fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use, scholarship, or research, is not an infringement of copyright.
Yes, sir. So, any questions as we're going along, things of that nature, I gladly will be answering. Put them in the chat, Baba Kushad. That way no one gets lost and we're all on one accord. Apayat, go ahead and play it out. Yes, sir. All right.
Looking at the monarchs who have been dubbed the Great, it is easy to become desensitized by its overuse. But one of the few ancient greats to truly deserve this lofty title was the founder and first King of Kings of the mighty Achaemenid Persian Empire, Cyrus II, otherwise known as Cyrus the Great. Welcome to our video covering the ascent to power of Cyrus and his actions that shaped the world in which we live. The sponsor of this video, Raid Shadow Legends, allows you to master hundreds of champions, millions of skill combinations, and countless tactics. Region, Empire in for you here. Following the destruction of the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 612 BC, 4 powers dominated the region: Egypt, Lydia, Babylon, and the Median Empire, whose territories stretched from eastern Iran to Cappadocia. One of its provinces was Persis, mountainous home to the subordinate kingdom of Anshan. Its rulers were the Achaemenid clan, said to be descended from an eponymous founder, Achaemenes. In myth, the Median prince Astyages had a prophetic dream that his pregnant daughter, Mandana, exuded water that would soon flood all Asia. So he wed her to one of these kings of Anshan, knowing that no son of a mere Persian would ever rule the great Median Empire. But he had another dream soon after, in which vines grew from Mandana's womb to engulf the entire world. Terrified, paranoid Astyages decided to kill her child when it was born. This boy, known as Kurosh by Old Persian pronunciation, but to us as Cyrus, came into the world at the royal palace of Ecbatana in 600 BC. Astyages immediately ordered one of his senior men, Harpagus, to take the baby, kill him, and dispose of the body far away.
We know what happened to him.
Harpagus said that he would do as ordered.
Again, this is the story that Herodotus gave about what happened because he refused to do this. So we're going to get into the audio of now everything that happened.
And took the boy home. Unwilling to kill the child, but fearing Astyages' wrath, Harpagus ordered a shepherd, Mithridates, to do the deed for him. However, rather than killing the young Cyrus, Mithridates and his wife secretly raised him as their own son. Harpagus had no idea, and neither did Astyages. One day, Cyrus, then known in his secret existence as Agradetes, was playing king and court with a few other boys, one of whom was the son of a Median magnate. As part of their game, King Cyrus ended up whipping the noble boy, who then subsequently complained to his father about the incident. The perpetrator was summoned to answer before Astyages, who quickly discerned that he was the boy Harpagus had been ordered to kill. Astyages feigned calm, explaining to Harpagus that he had often felt remorse for the order, and that his actions were actually to be celebrated with a feast. At Astyages' order, Harpagus sent his 13-year-old son to the palace, and then arrived later himself as a guest. During the feast, Astyages made Harpagus eat his own son, and although the courtier claimed, "Whatever you do, sire, is agreeable to me," he would forever bear a grudge. Meanwhile, Cyrus was spared, and even went on to become royal cupbearer, a position of considerable prestige. The young Persian also served as a royal envoy and advisor, becoming indispensable to Astyages. Cyrus also wed Cassandana, a fellow Achaemenid and the love of his life. At the same time, Harpagus had been gathering the anti-Astyages nobles and befriending Cyrus. In 552 BC, they decided to act. The prince, who was now in his 40s, made his way back to his homeland and raised it in revolt. After winning an initial battle there and another on the border between Persia and Media, Cyrus and his allies crushed Astyages' army outside Pasargadae after Harpagus betrayed Astyages, taking Ecbatana soon thereafter. Almost immediately, Median governors in Hyrcania, Parthia and Bactria submitted as well. The Achaemenid Empire, which was at its beginning a collaboration between Persia and Media, was born. In the aftermath, Cyrus dutifully administered his newly won domain. His territories were divided into semi-autonomous provinces known as satrapies, and were governed by satraps, drawn initially from Persians and Medes alike. Overseers were sent to supervise these lesser rulers, and 10,000 of Cyrus's greatest warriors were instituted as the notorious spear-wielding immortals, whose ranks never went below that number. The King of Kings did all this under the cover of friendship treaties enacted with his powerful neighbors Babylon and Lydia. However, buoyed in confidence by a famously deceptive answer from the oracle at Delphi, Lydian King Croesus began mobilizing forces to assault this up-jumped Persian usurper. By 548 BC, likely informed by expertly employed spies as to the military buildup at the Halys River, Cyrus sent envoys to the Ionian Greeks, asking them to stay out of the upcoming war. However, cities loyal to Lydia refused outright, with the exception of Miletus. This decision among the Aegean Greeks would eventually, over half a century later, trigger the legendary Greco-Persian Wars of Salamis and Thermopylae. Crossing the Halys, and therefore the Achaemenid frontier by bridge in 547, Croesus and his large army approached Teria and put it under siege. Hearing of the invasion at his capital of Ecbatana, Cyrus marched west to confront the Lydians, joined at multiple stages by loyal armies from the satrapies. The core of his force consisted of Persians and Medes, but there were also Hyrcanians, Sake, and many others. Teria had already fallen, and its people.
The Sake is another name for Northern Kingdom. Sakae. The Parthians, predominantly made up of Northern Kingdom and remnants of Judah, were the Parthians. Sake comes from Isaac, from Ashak. Northern Kingdom were known and called as the House of Isaac in the book of Amos. So Northern Kingdom, Scythians, Omri, Umri, so on and so forth. Northern Kingdom went many names in captivity. And they were scattered where? In the provinces and cities of the Medes. So again, to cover up and summarize everything so far, the first rib we know, Astyages, the kingdom of the Medes. This is the second rib. Apayat, go ahead.
People sent to Lydia as slaves when the Achaemenid army, probably lesser in size than the Lydian one, arrived. Sure in his ability to defeat Cyrus, the Lydian king drew up for battle, but in the clash that lasted the full day, the Persian center smashed straight through and badly bloodied his army, leading Croesus to withdraw to Sardis. The Lydian king expected that winter would stop the hostilities, so he sent emissaries to the allied Babylon, Egypt, and Sparta, calling on them to send armies in 5 months to assist him. Crucially, he also sent all his mercenaries away with similar orders. However, bucking the trend of warfare in this period, Cyrus pushed into Lydia and encamped in sight of Sardis. Croesus sent a formidable cavalry army out to face the Persians. Harpagus advised that their own cavalry be mounted on camels and form the vanguard in order to spook the Lydian horses. When the battle was joined, this maneuver succeeded, and Croesus, despite heavy losses, was able to retreat into the fortress of Sardis. Before the Persians encircled the city, Croesus managed to send out pleas for assistance now. However, after just a 14-day siege, one of the greatest Near Eastern capitals fell. After that one lightning campaign, Sardis and all of Asia Minor was now Achaemenid territory. Croesus himself was eventually spared and brought to advise Cyrus. The oracle was correct, but he had destroyed his own mighty empire rather than that of the Persians. Although expansion via conquest does not seem to have been a priority for the Persian king before the Lydian invasion of his territory, it is all but certain that he would have set out to dominate the region at some point. Following the annexation of Croesus' kingdom, Cyrus and his generals set about creating a great new capital at Pasargadae, in addition to subduing resistance in peripheral territories such as Bactria and Urartu. By 542 BC, Cyrus's attention was focused on another great power ripe for conquest, the so-called Neo-Babylonian Empire. Far from the good old days of Nebuchadnezzar II, the current Babylonian king, Nabonidus, wasn't a good ruler. He diverted favor and funding away from Babylonian priests, neglected the common people, stopped renovation works on the city, and even cancelled the New Year's festival of the great god Marduk. Discontent was rife and...
So that was the second rib, the kingdom of Lydia. And now at this point, as we just heard, 542 BC, 3 years away from 539 BC, Cyrus has his sights set on Babylon to finally overtake it, which is the third rib. So all of you seen on the map geographically, the Achaemenid Empire and how expansive it's become with Cyrus as king, and now is about to overtake Babylon. So as you just heard, Nabonidus, who's no longer worshiping the chief supreme deity of the Babylonians, Marduk, and why the priest rejected him and hated him, is now going to be the same reason why Babylon is going to fall to Cyrus and why they're going to reject Nabonidus as king.
And that's represented by the ribs, the bear's mouth.
Right. Those three ribs represent the biggest portions of the kingdom that he inherited and eventually conquered and took over.
Mede, Lydia, and Babylon.
Exactly. Go ahead,
Loyalty to the king and his son Belshazzar was at an all-time low, and Cyrus was all too aware of this state of affairs. Persian infiltrators began spreading word throughout Nabonidus' empire that Cyrus intended to restore Marduk's supremacy in Babylon. In 540, sensing that the time was right, Cyrus dispatched his army to seize Babylon-dominated Elam with the help of a native revolt. This blow brought Nabonidus back from his retirement and to Babylon, where he took control of the army. Notoriously, he seized the sacred statues of his many domains in order to ensure their obedience. The next year, Cyrus and his increasingly powerful army marched south to invade the Babylonian Empire, but he would do it as a liberator. However, their progress was blocked for weeks by a swollen tributary of the Tigris River just north of Opis. Although the obstacle was overcome by Persian troops digging many channels around the river to divert its course, this delay allowed Nabonidus to assemble a large army and advance north. The king himself, however, remained ensconced at Sippar, while General Gabaryam conducted the war. The battle took place in the last days of September near Opis. What we do know is that Cyrus's forces, fighting under the gold and red Shabaz standard, won yet another crushing victory. Opis was plundered, while Gabaryam surrendered, earning a place in the Persian hierarchy. Nabonidus went south by river. Rather than facing another hostile army in the field, Cyrus instead arrived with his vast host outside the massive, sprawling city of Babylon to find Nabonidus' armies bivouacked inside, braced for an extensive siege. It would, even to the indomitable Cyrus, have been a truly daunting sight. Its defenses included multiple layers of moat, the great Euphrates River itself, and two colossal walls, inner and outer, 80 feet high or more, stretching for 15 miles around the city's near triangular circumference. Tidy grid-patterned districts were crisscrossed with streets and occupied by grand-scale residences, temples, palaces, and, most sturdy of all, the great citadel of the Royal Guard next to the Ishtar Gate. As he usually did, King Cyrus called together his advisors for a council of war immediately upon arrival, and debated upon how to best gain the city. A full-scale assault, they decided, would result in massive casualties, so they decided on a complex strategy relying on subtlety, intelligence, and timing. First, to maintain the illusion of a conventional siege, the Achaemenid king split his army in two, stationing one on the eastern bank of the Euphrates, where the river entered Babylon in the north, and the other downstream, where the river left it. Cyrus himself took every non-combatant, including servants, slaves, and attendants, north, arriving soon thereafter at a basin, which had been excavated years earlier to temporarily redirect the river. Putting his men to work for a similar end, Cyrus had a wide channel dug from the disused basin to the river, and chopped giant palm trees down to act as levees to redirect the water. When the earth was removed, A great portion of the Euphrates' flow was diverted into the basin rather than flowing towards Babylon. While Xenophon informs us that the water level before this ingenious work was over 2 men deep, Herodotus states that after, the Euphrates was only waist deep. The impassable river was now a viable entry route into the city. That very night, carefully timed because it marked the advent of a great festival of music, drinking, and revelry in Babylon, Cyrus had Gabaryam infiltrate the city via the diminished river, which the celebratory citizens or guards of Nabonidus' capital didn't seem to have noticed. The defenders, lulled into a false sense of security by their great strength of defense and enfeebled by drink, were unable to resist the Persian infiltration. By daybreak, Prince Belshazzar was dead, the gates were opened, and the city was under Achaemenid control. Nabonidus, who had actually been in nearby Borsippa, was surrendered to the Persian monarch and then allowed to take a comfortable and by all accounts happy exile in Camanea. 2 weeks after he captured the city and dealt with all the necessary formalities, on October 26, 539, Cyrus entered Babylon to a rapturous welcome, restoring Marduk's priesthood to its elevated position and tending to the needs of the people. To further show his benevolence, the new ruler kept taxes to a minimum, completed several public works, and returned idols seized by Nabonidus. The verse account of Nabonidus sums up what the people, or at least the favored priests, may have felt. They're like prisoners when the prisons are opened. Liberty is restored to those who were surrounded by oppression. All rejoice to look upon him as king. In a famous act that would gain him unabashed plaudits within the pages of the Hebrew Bible, Cyrus the Great returned thousands of Jews who had previously been deported as part of Nebuchadnezzar's so-called Babylonian exile to Jerusalem. Not only did he restore Jews to their homeland, but it's also said that Cyrus ordered the construction and state funding of what eventually became Jerusalem's Second Temple. For this generosity, he was the only foreigner ever to be named a Messiah in the Jewish religion.
Stop here.
Without this, it's possible that Judaism would have...
All right. So, we're going to read scriptures along with what was just brought out with the video. Nabonidus was exiled to Carmania, which is in Iran. Did all of you hear about the defenses that Babylon had, the high walls, the palaces, the royal gardens? That was all due to Nebuchadnezzar's building projects. So it goes back to Daniel when he looked upon his kingdom and looked at everything he made, which is why the pride was built up in them that Daniel told him your kingdom is going to come to an end. Wow. So along the lines of that, when it talks about how all of you guys heard the Babylonians were feasting, they didn't think the Persians were going to come in, infiltrate their high walls. Remember that we were just reading in Daniel chapter 5, as a matter of fact. Get Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1.
Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords. And drank wine before the 1,000.
So he was having a feast at this time, a grand feast. So remember, as he just described in the video, how they were feasting. They didn't think anything was going to happen. Their walls are impenetrable. Their defense is so high that they can't think that they're possibly going to get and come in. Skip down to verse 30.
Verse 30. And that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain.
So the same night that they stopped the waters of the Euphrates that we just talked about, assuming that we just watched in the video, was the same night he was killed. So all the feasting, the partying, and everything like that going on, that's the same night he was killed. And you can evidently see they didn't think anything was to come of it because they didn't think that they could get inside the walls and the gates and surpass them. So now we're going to get into the prophecy of Cyrus, because in 539 BC, he's known in secular history as the Great Liberator and quote unquote created the first charter of human rights with the Cyrus Cylinder. We're not going to get into that, but the reason why I say all that is because within that cylinder, he allowed all oppressed peoples underneath the Babylonian Empire to return home and worship and serve their own gods. That's why he said all the statues that Nabonidus took, he returned them to their peoples. The thing about us, though, as Israelites, we don't worship idols. So there's no gods for us to be given. So what we're going to read the decree, which is separate but also a part of the Cyrus cylinder in secular history that the dude was talking about in the video, is also a part of the proclamation of freeing Jews to go home to go and build the temple. But this entire lesson surrounds the fact that without the scriptures, without the prophets, without the Lord himself, there is no history. Let's get Isaiah chapter 44. Isaiah chapter 44 and verse 26. Let's see if any one of you have read this, and if you have, now you're reading it, and now you'll understand what the context of these particular scriptures are.
Isaiah 44, verse 26.
What?
That confirmed the word of his servant and performed the counsel of his messengers. That said to Jerusalem, thou shalt be inhabited, and to the cities of Judah ye shall be built. And I will raise up the decayed place thereof.
Go ahead.
Verse 27. That saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers.
What?
That saith to Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasures. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, thy foundation shall be laid.
So Cyrus is the entry in the open way and gateway as to why in 538 BC, when the proclamation was made, we were allowed to go home. So what we're about to read in the next verse, in the very next chapter, is on behalf of the fact that Cyrus was actually prophesied to do everything that we just watched in the video. The only reason why Cyrus was able to even come forth and be a figure within world history is because of the scriptures. Literally. So, read Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 1.
Isaiah 45, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed.
To who?
To his anointed.
Go ahead.
To Cyrus.
To who?
To Cyrus.
Cyrus was prophesied 150 years before he was even alive in the time of Hezekiah to do everything he did that we just watched in the video. Go ahead.
Whose right hand I have held to subdue nations before him.
We just talked about all the three ribs, the Medes, the Lydians, and now the Babylonians. Go ahead.
And I will loose the lions of kings to open before him the two lead gates.
Right.
And the gates shall not be shut.
Skip down to verse 13.
Verse 13. I have raised them up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city, and he shall let go my captives. Not for price nor reward, saith the Lord of hosts.
Because he freed all peoples at the time of the liberation when he walked into Babylon. But to us particularly, we're about to read his proclamation that he made to the Jews at the time, telling them to go home and build the temple. Now, he said something that I didn't like, and I'm going to dispute here. Now, in the scriptures, it does call Cyrus anointed. That word anointed there comes from the Hebrew word mashak. But when someone's anointed or in the figure of a Messiah, it becomes a Mashiach. So Mashiach means the anointed one, Messiah or Messianic prince, and it also refers to Cyrus. Now, this particular heathen that's called a Messiah is not anything important but to the fact that it just means he was chosen to do what he did. So if he's the liberator freeing all peoples, it would definitely include the Israelites that were over in captivity in Babylon and scattered wherever and whomever to allow them to go home and rebuild the temple. Now, in the Strong's definition, it just says usually a consecrated person as a king, priest, or saint, or it can specifically be the Messiah. There's only one Messiah, and that's YHWH HaMashiach, which means YHWH the anointed. Cyrus is just anointed. It just means he's just a vessel used and chosen that did what he did pertaining to the proclamation we're about to read inside the book of Ezra. So Cyrus being a Messiah is not anything on the level of Christ. It just means he was chosen to do what he did. We've had plenty of messiahs all throughout the scriptures. Moses was a messiah. David was a messiah. Jonathan, the son of Saul, was a messiah because he wrought great salvation, delivering the Israelites from the Philistines. The judges were messiahs. It's nothing new. It just means the one that's consecrated, chosen, and the one that rises up that the Lord chooses to save and to deliver his people. But YHWH, the only begotten Son of the Most High God, is the Messiah. That is not to be mistaken and confused, and very much distinguished from the rest of the messiahs that we read about within the scriptures. We're sons of God, but there is only one begotten Son of the Most High God. Let's get the book of Ezra, chapter 1 and verse 1.
Ezra 1, verse 1. And Josiah held the feast of the Passover in Jerusalem.
No, Ezra 1. Ezra. Oh, so lucky. He was reading Ezra.
The book of Ezra 1, verse 1. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia.
The king of Persia. Why? Because he's the one that made the proclamation, and according to the Cyrus cylinder, allowed all oppressed peoples to go home and worship their own gods. Now, what proves and what's evidence of the fact of that? Remember in the book of Daniel, when that image was made of gold, and everyone that didn't bow down unto it, him and his family were, excuse me, I believe everything was taken and stripped from him and his family. He allowed everybody oppressed underneath the Babylonians that made everyone bow down and worship this one golden image or the same gods of the Babylonians to now go home and worship their own gods. So this proclamation that he's making specifically to the Israelites is separate from what he declared the rest of the nations to have, that the video explained, because it said that the statues that Nabonidus took away from the rest of the nations, he gave them all back. But we don't worship idols. That's why we're reading this proclamation here, and we just read about the prophecy of Cyrus 150 years before he was even alive, of what we're reading now to the Israelite nation and peoples, i.e. the Jews at this time. But
that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord power of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth.
Right.
And he hath charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah.
When it says Cyrus my anointed, again, it just means he was the one chosen. It's not that he's particularly building the temple. He's giving everything that was taken back inside 586 BC that was taken from the Jews at the time dwelling in Judah. He's giving everything back because it was taken away. In Daniel chapter 5, when he was having the feast, he brought out, Belshazzar brought out all the vessels that was taken by Nebuchadnezzar when they took siege to Jerusalem. He's now making this proclamation to give everything back so that way we can build and make the temple up again. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him. And let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord, power of Israel. He is the God, which is in Jerusalem.
Read the verse 4.
Verse 4. And whosoever remaineth in any place where he sojourneth, let the men of his place help him with silver and with gold, and with goods and with beasts, besides the freewill offering of the house of God that is in Jerusalem.
So this helps the historical narrative because, again, we don't have idols. So he couldn't give us any idols back because there were none to be taken. Right. So if he's offering to give back the silver and the gold and everything else that was in the possessions inside the temple, it proves the fact that he knew about us that were also oppressed and why we're reading this proclamation here within the scriptures, which means evidently, according to that proclamation he made, we're also included in that list. That's why we're reading it here. So again, along with the lesson, this entails Cyrus the Great in the beginning of the Persian Achaemenid period. So this lesson tonight was to kind of lay the ground and the framework for next week's lessons going into Purim, because we're going to furthermore get into the timeline of the Persian kings. But before we can do that, the groundwork tonight was laying it with the Median and the Achaemenid dynasty with the Persians, the history, the background, the kingdom of the Lydians, the kingdom of the Babylonians, Nabonidus, Belshazzar, so on and so forth. A little bit of Herodotus with the histories within his book to explain the story with Astyages, so on and so forth. So this lesson tonight was to carry over into next week. That way we're not lost and confused as to what time period we're in, what's happening, what's taking place. We're already in the period, but I'm going to continue it that way. We understand the time period of, as we're further reading more, we know these people by their names and what it is we're reading into, so that we're not confused. Put a comment in the chat if that's clear. If there's any comments, concerns, questions, feel free to add them in now. Feel free to ask. I hope the video was clear for everyone pertaining to the reign of Cyrus, his origins, his beginnings, how he arose to king, so on and so forth. I didn't want to make it too detailed. I wanted to make it short, precise, simple as much as I could pertaining to his life, his background, and his history, that we were just able to understand it. I was about to say, all the sisters said, "Come, where the brothers at?" Come on, Sharp. Which Nebuchadnezzar was in Bel and the Dragon again? There was no Nebuchadnezzar in Bel and the Dragon. That was the king of the Medes, Astyages, that was overthrown by Cyrus in 550 BC. Unless you mean the particular Nebuchadnezzar over the Babylonian Empire, that Nebuchadnezzar is Nebuchadnezzar II. Gotta appreciate him. Was the longest reigning Babylonian king, and if not the most famed king that all of history knows, was the king responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC. There's a lot more history I'm going to get into aside from 1 Samuel with lessons like these, because a lot of us may or may not understand when you read into the lives of the prophets, all their books is just going into their lives from the first person perspective of the time period that they lived in. Isaiah lived in the time of Hezekiah. He was his prophet. Jeremiah lived in the time of Josiah. He was also amongst the prophets. And it was amongst the last kings as a prophet. Ezekiel was a prophet in captivity that was carried away captive in the reign of Jehoiachin in 597 BC. These things are important, so that way we understand how much history mirrors the scriptures, and that way we're able to go into the scriptures, grasp the historical understanding, and gain a sense of more of what we're reading. So again, I hope it was clear for everyone. We have next week, we have Purim beginning at Khan. That was Cyrus. I put that in the chat for you, just so you're not confused. So we have Purim next week beginning Thursday sundown, but we will be gathering and coming together Friday sundown. It is a 2-day feast, but we will be coming together on Friday sundown at 8. That way we're able to just keep the feast day accordingly, bringing the high holy day together in unison as an organization, as a camp. close this on now. I madim upon him akudam. This is Psalm chapter 129. Many a time have they afflicted me from my youth, may Israel now say. Many a time have they afflicted me from my youth, yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers have moved upon my back, they made their long furrows. The Lord is righteous, he hath cut asunder the cords of the wicked. Let them all be confounded and turn back that hate Zion. Let them be as grass upon the housetops, which withereth before it groweth up. Wherewith the mower filleth not his hand, nor he that bindeth sheaves his bosom. Neither do they which go by say, the blessing of the Lord be upon you. We bless you in the name of the Lord. In the name of YHWH, SHAMI, the water from Yad, Aman.
Aman Shabbat. Aman Barak.
YHWH.